Welcome to the Chasing Spirituality podcast. I'm your host, Megan, and I'm so excited that you're joining me today. Each episode is full of heartfelt and expansive content that will really help you expand your consciousness and grow as a person. I created this podcast because I wanted to share my own personal experiences on my spiritual journey, but I also wanted to meet others and have them share what they've been through and how they've gotten to where they are today. If you haven't done so already, it would really mean a lot to me if you could rate and review the podcast. This really helps the podcast grow and reach more people, but it also allows me to get more guests on the show. Now on to today's topic. Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome back to another episode of Chasing Spirituality. It's just going to be me today, no guest. I'm not really sure if you guys like these episodes, if you still like the solo stuff, or if you prefer when I have guests on, or if you like both. Let me know. Send me an email, reach out to me on social media if you want to be a guest, if you would like me to interview someone in particular, also throw that out there. And if you haven't done so already, please feel free to give Chasing Spirituality a review. This helps me get better guests for you guys, and the more reviews that we have, the more the podcast will grow, and the more people I will be able to reach out to and connect with and get them on the show. So today I have a few things that I've really been wanting to talk about, but I think for today I'm going to stick with this fear that a lot of people have about the judgment of others. And the reason why this is on my mind is I recently was part of this workshop, and I forgot what it felt like to be at the beginning of this awakening, if you will. I forgot what it felt like when I first really started to expand my consciousness, and I started to awaken to all of these, ideas and concepts that are within spirituality. When I woke from the matrix, if you will, I forgot that not only does sometimes you feel crazy, like all of this stuff is new. All of your thinking has changed. You're waking up to things that you never thought of before, or if you did think of them, it was normally not in a good way, and you may have even teased or made fun of people who thought this way. And so you're waking up to all these ideas, and part of you at some point usually thinks that you're crazy, that you might be insane. At least I know I did. But after that, after you realize that you may not be as crazy as you think that you are, you start fearing that everyone else is still going to think that you're crazy. Everyone else is still going to judge you and talk about you and not understand what you believe or where you're coming from. And I forgot about this part. I don't know how or why. I guess, I definitely went through it. I remember very, very vividly, wondering, well, what will everyone think if I start to act this way and I start to believe these things? And to be completely honest with you, I kept it hidden. I kept my, spiritual side hidden from a lot of people. From most people, to be honest. I was ashamed. I was ashamed to admit that I believed in these things that were so far out of, normal society standards and normal society beliefs. And I know part of that comes from, my own personal journey and this fear of rejection and this fear of abandonment that I have. That's something that's very deeply rooted in my human experience. So I know part of it is because of those things, but I also know that this is not something that is just my issue or something that just was my issue. This is something that is very common in our society. Many people fear rejection and they fear abandonment. And this is what causes us to turn into sheep. This is what causes us to conform and, follow the herd, conform to society norms. And depending on where you live and what kind of society you're in and, your upbringing and lots of other factors will obviously depend and determine on what you're comfortable with allowing others to know about you, what you're comfortable with sharing, when you're comfortable for going against the grain, when you're comfortable to speak up for yourself and your differences of opinion when they're different from others. So, all of this is going to be different based off of you and your experience. But I would say, collectively as a whole, we all in some way fear rejection and we fear being ostracized. And this may even have to do with past lives. I'm sure many of us were burned at the stake for things that we believed in and that we said and did in our past, which makes a lot of sense why we would be so resistant to speaking up for ourselves now and why we would, really have a hard time voicing our opinion when it is different from everyone else around us. So when I was in this workshop, there was someone there that I could tell they were starting to, awaken. They were starting to really open up to these spiritual concepts and these spiritual ideas, and they were starting to believe in a lot of things that society is not as open to. And she just kept saying over and over again, things like, you can't talk about that kind of stuff with anyone because then they'll just think that you're crazy. They'll just try to throw you, in a madhouse. Well, I wonder what would happen if, you went and you told your doctor that you see spirits. Do you think they would try to diagnose you and say that you're clinically insane? And, I'm so afraid to open up and tell people and tell clients that I can, feel energy and I can see energy and I can see spirits because, you just don't talk about that kind of stuff. And in no way am I making fun of her at all. I actually, I feel for her. I felt sorry for her in a way because she was still going through that part of it. And I remember how hard it was for me when I went through that part. And in fact, it was so bad that I deactivated and deleted a lot of my social media accounts and I created new ones. And I wouldn't invite or friend request some of my family because I didn't want them to judge me. I didn't want to even have to deal with the judgment. And now looking back on that, well, I will say in the moment, I didn't, in the moment I thought I was doing it for me, and in a way I was doing it to protect myself. I was doing it so that I could have a private space to be vocal and to be myself without having to fear judgment, without having to fear what others would think or say. But now looking back on it, I feel sorry for that part of me as well, because I shouldn't have had to do that in the first place. I shouldn't have had to hide myself and hide my beliefs and hide who I am. But I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to let people know that I had changed and that I identify and believe with a lot of things that people just don't understand, and they just refuse to understand. And I'm finally getting to a point where I'm not afraid. I actually am comfortable with who I am, and I embrace who I am, and I love me. You know, I definitely still struggle with self-love and confidence. That's something that is part of my path and part of my journey, and I believe that's something that I'll always have to work on from time to time. But I will say, when it comes to my spiritual beliefs and my spiritual practices and the things that I hold dear to me, I'm not afraid to share those anymore. I'm not afraid to admit that I am a spiritual person and that I believe in energy, and I believe that we are all connected and we are all one. And I'm not afraid to admit that I practice witchcraft and that I am supportive of plant medicine, including psychedelics. And I can now look back and see how much I have progressed. I can see how in certain situations and in certain interactions with certain people, I would bite my tongue and I wouldn't say how I really felt. I wouldn't say what I truly believed. Even some of the small things, even things, like politics and things of that nature. I would just instead, bite my tongue and not express how I really felt. And part of that is because I was conditioned to be a people pleaser. I was conditioned to be as non-confrontational as possible. And I thought that I was doing this because, that's what maturity is. Maturity is able to, see things from all perspectives and not lash out and not become confrontational and argumentative and make a big deal out of things. But now I know that that was just a lie that I told myself to keep myself comfortable and quiet. Because at any point, I can express how I feel. I can disagree. That doesn't mean that I have to be confrontational. That doesn't mean that I have to start an argument. If someone says something that I disagree with, I have every right to tell them that I disagree and that I believe in something else. That doesn't mean that I have to get angry and stomp around and shake my fists in the air and cause a big scene and a big fight. And for some reason, people think that that's what disagreement is. People think that if you disagree, then you're arguing. And that's far from the truth. When we disagree with each other, we're actually doing everyone a favor. We're doing ourselves a favor because we're actually allowing ourselves to be authentic and to be true. But we're also doing other people a favor because we may be opening their minds to things that they've never considered. We may be sharing perspectives with them that could change their lives. And we also could be giving them the example that they need to let them know that it's okay for them to be authentic as well. I've came across so many people now that I can tell they're so afraid to be themselves. They're so afraid to really say what's on their mind and what they believe, because it's different from their parents or their siblings or their friends, their peers. So they just pretend and they just agree with whoever they're around. But if we are able to stand up in front of those people and say, oh no, I don't agree with that. I don't think that that's, the truth. That's not the truth for me. It may be the truth for you, and that's okay. But sometimes when we're the ones that stand up and voice that, it shows the other people who are starting to awaken and that are starting to align with the truth that they can do that too. You become the example. You become what they need to see so that they can grow and so that they can move forward along their journey. I have an example of this. My best friend, she was at work one day and this person came in, and some of the coworkers started talking about how this girl was not a good person. They started talking about how she was into drugs and she lost, custody of her children, and that she was, just a bad person. And instead of my friend being like, gossiping and saying, oh no, like, how could that happen? She just listened. And then she realized that they were simply talking about how the girl does psychedelics. Well, my friend is an advocate for psychedelics, like, we see nothing wrong with psychedelics. Psychedelics are not a harmful drug. So she goes in there and she starts talking to the girl. She treats her just like she would treat anyone else. Strikes up a conversation with her. They start talking about expanding consciousness and, just they end up having a beautiful conversation. And all the coworkers are staring at her like, wow, you could do that? And she's like, yeah. And they knew that my friend wasn't crazy. They'd been working with her for weeks. So they knew that she was, just a normal person. And so she could tell that it really piqued their interest, and it really got their minds thinking like, well, maybe we were too harsh to judge because of just the things that we heard, the things that we assumed. And it's just little moments like that, sometimes when you admit that you don't follow the crowd, when you admit that, you don't believe in the Christian God, that you believe in, more of a pantheism type of reality, a type of, belief. When you say that you believe, that we are all one divine consciousness, when you say that you believe in energy and because of that you practice the law of attraction or manifestation or witchcraft, sometimes it's an eye-opener for other people that they can be different, that it's okay to be different. And so then you help them progress. And especially people at the very beginning of their awakening, they need this kind of support. So I really encourage you to be more vocal if you can. If you're ready. If you're not ready, then, don't do anything that you're not comfortable with. But if you have been on this path for a while and you still don't, openly talk about some of these concepts, I encourage you to start, because that's really the only way we're going to see change. And I can tell that, spirituality is definitely on the rise. It's been on the rise. It's growing. It's expanding. And more people are awakening. So those of us who are already awakened, if we can start standing up for these spiritual ideas and concepts and speaking about them and opening up about them without fear of judgment and ridicule, we will open roads for those who are just starting to feel like it's safe. And if you're still at the beginning of your journey, I want to tell you that one day you will get to the point where you don't care what other people think, because that's where I'm at now. So whatever you can do to help ease that shame and that guilt, just work through it. Because at the end of the day, you're the only one that you have to answer to. And the more that you're in alignment with who you are, and the more that you're in alignment with your truth and your authenticity, the happier you're going to be. And I encourage you to start sharing that with the people that you love and the people that you're close to. And if they don't understand, that's okay. They don't have to understand. And you can tell them that. You can say, this is what I believe, and I understand if you don't. And I understand if it's different from what you believe. I'm not asking anyone to believe what I believe. But I am asking you to respect what I believe, because you're not going to change my mind, and I'm not going to try to change yours. And it's as simple as that. And will bring you right back to boundaries. If you have people in your life that won't respect your beliefs, that continue to interrogate you in a negative way instead of a curious way, or they ridicule you in some way, they judge you in some way, then you definitely need to set very clear boundaries and let them know, that will not be tolerated. You don't ridicule them, you don't judge them for their beliefs, they're not going to do it to you as well. And then if they can't, then I would say that is a relationship that needs to be severed. And maybe not permanently, but at least until you're at a place where you're more comfortable having that kind of toxic behavior around. And that's kind of what I did in the beginning, is I knew that I was too fragile to be around judgment and to be around people that may ridicule me. So instead, I just let my fear keep it a secret, basically. I just didn't tell anyone unless it was someone who was very close to me. I did tell, people that I was very close to, but as far as extended family, extended friends, and things like that, I just cut them out entirely, because I didn't want to have to deal with it. And honestly, I didn't even give most of them a chance. I didn't even give them a chance to get to know the new me. And I'm not saying that was wrong or that was right. That's just where I was in that moment. That's where I was at that point in my journey. And in fact, you may have noticed, if you follow me on social media, if you're familiar with my website, my name on social media for the longest was Maggie Luna, which is clearly, not a real name. my last name is not Luna. So that was, I guess, more of like a publicity name. And I told myself at the time when I created it that I wanted a fake name because I didn't want people to be able to find out who I really was. Okay? So this is what I told myself. I told myself that I didn't want anyone to be able to find out who I really was. That way, if I did, if the podcast, if my line, if at any point I grew to be, a big public figure, no one would be able to trace who I truly am and be able to stalk me or, find out where I live or anything crazy like that. And I even would reference the show You on Netflix. I don't know how many of you guys have seen that, but it is about a guy who basically starts social media stalking this girl, finds out so much stuff about her, and finds out where she lives and everything, and he's a psycho. And so I used that as kind of like my reasoning to continue using this fake name as well, because I didn't want to be social media stalked and I didn't want someone to find out where I live. But now that I'm looking back on it, and I've known this for a little while now. This isn't like brand new to me. I've had some awareness about this for several months. I just was at a place where I wasn't really sure how to transition out of it. But when I started to really reflect on it, I realized it wasn't, that wasn't really the main reason. And, some of that may have been some underlying reasons. But the main reason was I didn't want my family and my friends and people that I hadn't came out to know this side of me. Again, because I was afraid of shame. I was afraid of judgment. And now, like I said, I've had some awareness about this for a few months now. But then I started having shame around the idea that I felt shame about being who I am. So it was like, okay, well, first I was shameful about my beliefs and what people would think. Now I'm shameful that I felt shameful. So it's like, okay, well, what do I do now? And so I was like, well, how do I get out of this? Like, do I just come out on social media and say, hey, everybody, by the way, my real name is not Maggie Luna. Sorry to break it to you. I've been going under an alias for the entire, time I've had the podcast, and I just felt like shame around that too, because it's like, well, that sounds so silly. Like, that sounds so stupid. But at the time, for me, it wasn't stupid. And having that encounter made me realize that a lot of people feel this way. Like, these are real fears. And I can see now that that's just where I was at that point in my journey. And that's okay. I can hold space for the girl who was too afraid to be herself. I can hold space for the girl who created an alias just so she could be herself on social media. Just so she could share her spiritual insights and mystical experiences without fear of judgment. And that's okay. I still love that part of myself. So if that's where you're at, just know that you're going to grow out of it. Once you continue on this path, you continue doing the self-work like I know you are, you'll grow out of that. And you'll realize that you can be yourself. And you can say your truth. And you can be authentic. And that those who don't understand and those who judge you, because there will be people that judge you, that will never go away. But you'll be more confident in yourself that you won't care anymore. You'll love yourself enough to where any judgment and any shame that people try to throw at you, it'll just bounce off. It'll just roll off. And you'll be good. And I am still working on some of these things. I'm by no means completely healed. I still have to work on my boundaries. I still have to work on people pleasing. And I still have to work on being authentically true with who I am. But I have came a long way. And I am proud of myself. I'm proud of how far I've come. And so if you see that I have 2 names on social media, this is why. Because I created an alias. And that's okay. Do what you need to do. Do what you need to do to be you. Because once you start being you, that's when the growth really starts to happen. That's when you just start leveling up. So if you need to create an alias, create one. If you need to delete and block and remove everyone from social media that you're afraid will judge you or ridicule you or shame you, then do it. Just be aware of it. Be aware of it if you can. That way you can start working on that part of yourself that needs to heal. These are wounds that are normally deeply embedded and normally have even been passed on to us from our parents and grandparents. I know mine were. So don't be ashamed of them. Just embrace them and embrace where you are on this journey and do whatever you can to align yourself with your truth and with your best authentic self. And the rest will play out like it needs to. Much love. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening to Chasing Spirituality. You have no idea how much it really means to me to connect with you, to have your support, and just to be able to share my experience and my teachings with you. While we're on this break from the podcast, make sure that you follow me on social media. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook. And join the free Facebook group, Chasing Spirituality, so that we can stay in touch and we can connect.